Why, hello there, everyone. Today, Tekken Bloodlines, the new anime adaptation of the Tekken series, came out, and it's not even on the top 10 trending on Netflix, even though it came out today. So I wanted to record a short little review to aim some light at the show, since even though Tekken is a popular fighting game franchise, I guess relatively, fighting games in general are still pretty niche when it comes to other IPs and franchises on streaming services like Netflix. The show itself, as of right now, consists of only 6 episodes, which is obviously not very long and obviously not very committal. So like I said, I wanted to make this review kind of short so it is proportionate with the length of the show itself. Firstly, I want to make the disclaimer that I am by no means a Tekken lore expert. Obviously, though, I love fighting games, so I am familiar with the Tekken story in general. I know about the main characters, I know about the main character relationships, so I was already familiar with that sort of thing. But this is mostly to say that my perspective on the show, I think, is pretty representative of a lot of casual Tekken fans that may watch this. So essentially, I was evaluating this show on its own merits and not necessarily how consistent it was with the game lore. So if you've seen any of my other reviews, you'll know that I like starting with the overall presentation, which includes both the visuals and the music. So in terms of the visuals, a lot of people, including myself, were very weirded out about a very specific design choice in terms of the visual style. And if you haven't already noticed it, if you don't know what I'm talking about, once I say it, you will never be able to unsee it. And that is the fact that the shading on every single character is triangular. It's so weird. Instead of having, quote, realistic shading, it is literally just a triangle or a diamond shape. I guess diamond would be more accurate. But every character essentially has a diamond shape of a shadow on them. And it is very strange. However, even though I never really got used to it, I can't really critique it because it is such a deliberate design choice, such a deliberate artistic choice, that it is just inherently subjective. So I can't critique it for that, but I have to bring up how weird it is, and I was hoping I would get used to it, but I never did. But I do respect them for sticking with such a strange design choice. Anyway, though, in terms of the visuals in general, the show does use CG. However, the CG looks very good, especially because it employs the 3D in such a way that if you were to take any still screenshot, it would look 2D. And I think in some parts they actually use 2D, but it's so hard to tell the difference between the 2D and the 3D because, like I said, the 3D looks so good and they employ it in a way that looks 2D. However, they do take advantage of the fact that it's 3D because in a lot of the fights, they definitely make use of that free camera, and they remind you that it is a 3D thing by taking the camera all around these character models that would otherwise be very difficult, if not impossible, to do if it were a 2D show, right? So I actually have no qualms or complaints about the CG at all. I think it was great. Although I do have one critique about the presentation, and that has to do with some of the animations. This is pretty minor, though, because this doesn't have anything to do with fight scene animations. This has to do with a couple of times when some of the characters were running over to help another character who was in a fight. As they were running, their run animation looked really weird because it looked as if their arms and knees did not raise as much as they should have. So that was a little immersion breaking, but like I said, pretty minor stuff. Also, in the fights, whenever a character were to hit someone or block an attack, there were block effects and hit effects, reminiscent of those in the video games. So I thought that was a nice touch to add a video game element into the show without the show hitting the audience over the head with the fact that this is based on a video game, considering that some of the audience might not necessarily care that this is based on said video games, right? As for the music, it definitely has an unfair standard to match just because the music from the games is so good. The music from the games is legendary, right? So considering that, I think they did a decent job of making the music in the show capture the general essence and the general vibes as the music from the games, even with it not being as great, right? What's weird though is that none of the tracks ever really played for that long, so I would like to hear longer versions of each track if they were to ever make a part 2 of this show. It's only 6 episodes, so I don't know if they're treating this as season 1 or if they're treating it as a season 1 part 1, right? But either way, if this show does have any kind of continuation, I would like for them to give the tracks a bit more of an opportunity to shine, because like I said, no one track ever plays for very long. Talking about the content of the story itself now, and keep in mind that this is a spoiler-free review unless you consider character appearances a spoiler. Okay, so Jin Kazama is the main character in this show. I know some Tekken fans might have preferred Kazuya to be the main character, but personally, I think Jin Kazama is a pretty good main character. I think it's really funny that Jin Kazama, the resident bad boy of the Tekken franchise, is essentially just this homeschooled kid at the beginning, and then one of the first things he asks for is if he can get flames on his pants. I think that's hilarious, but not in a bad way, more of an endearing way, right? Especially with the symbolism of the flames, of course. But the main overall twist of this story I already knew about because, like I said, I know the general stuff about the Tekken lore, so I already knew about the twist that was coming, the big twist. But even so, if I were to try imagining and taking on the perspective of someone that knows nothing about the Tekken lore, I think the twist would have been predictable. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, though, because in this type of story, it being a martial arts story that's all about familial relationships, I don't know how else they would have done it. And of course, you have to do the same general story as the one from the Tekken games, right? But I can see some people maybe rolling their eyes at how predictable the twist is, even though I think it's cool. Something that was really weird, though, was during an exposition scene with 2 characters. The 2 characters were in front of monitors, and as one of the characters was giving this expo dump, the monitors were changing images and showing different visuals, which were essentially serving as a visual aid to the expo dump. But the strange part about it is that neither character was in control of the screen or what the screen showed. I didn't see a clicker in anyone's hand playing a slideshow or anything like that. So, like I said, a little bit strange, but maybe you can justify it by thinking it was voice controlled or something like that. Not that big of a deal, though. At first, I was giving it the benefit of the doubt by assuming it was a stylistic thing and that the monitors weren't canonically changing, but I think that was proven wrong because the characters do definitely act as if they are canonically seeing the screens change. Another minor critique would be how the show handles some of its miscellaneous character appearances, or maybe I should say the lack of appearances, because I was super hyped to see that Yoshimitsu and Kuma were in the show, of all things. But their fights happen off-screen, which I was really disappointed about because I was getting excited to see them animated, right? It makes sense, though, considering that the show has to cover an entire tournament arc in a mere 6 episodes, so you can't really show every single tournament fight in the show, which I understand, but it kind of made me wish they just didn't show those characters at all because it got my hopes up. Something the show doesn't have an excuse for, however, is the fact that King, despite having a fair amount of screen time and fights that happen on screen, is that he never gets to do Rolling Death Cradle. He never does Rolling Death Cradle. He does some of his other command throw animations, which are fun to watch, but the main thing people want to see is Rolling Death Cradle, right? So the whole time I was waiting to see him do it, and then he never does it. Although, now that I think about it, I guess the one possible excuse that they do have is that if they were to animate him Rolling Death Cradle someone, maybe it would break people's suspension of disbelief if the opponent were to recover from that and be just fine, right? Because it's a tournament arc, so you can't just have all these characters die when they lose. So maybe that's why. But if there is a part 2 and if King is still in it, I hope and expect to see a Rolling Death Cradle. Come on. And I guess that would lead me to my last but most major critique, and that has to do with the very end of the show in the final fight. I'm not going to say necessarily whether or not Devil Gene makes an appearance, but regarding that topic, however it is implemented into the show, I wish they took it further, and that's all I'm going to say about it. If you're familiar with Devil Gene and his abilities, then you'll probably feel the same way I did when you see the ending of the show. But it still had a very decent conclusion, right? It did have a conclusion, even though it was 6 episodes. It didn't just end on hardcore sequel bait. There was no cliffhanger, although, of course, because the Tekken lore is pretty big, there is still plenty more to explore, and they definitely left that possibility open at the end so they can add more episodes. But even if it were to just end with these 6 episodes, even with it being super short, I think it would still stand as a well-respected and a relatively well-produced fighting game anime that can stand alongside all the other good video game adaptations. Anyways, let me know what you guys thought about the show if you saw it for yourself, and if you have any kind of Tekken lore that you would like to share, please do so in the comments. So with all that said, I will see you guys later. Bye for now.